Today on the TMZ Podcast.
Welcome to the TMZ Podcast. Derek and Jason here.
Derek, more and more video. It seems like every week video surfaces of cops acting in a way that subjects them to criticism. Yeah. Not always wrong, certainly not always right, but subjects them to criticism. And here we have a crazy video, as bad as you see on the day-to-day videos. We've seen worse, right?
Yes.
George Floyd's way worse, but here we have a cop punching a woman directly in the face and basically knocking her cold.
Yeah, it's a video out of New York, and this is the New York Police Department was responding to an area where they were trying to arrest a suspect, okay? And there's a
attempted
crowd
murder
of people. Attempted murder, a very serious, violent felony. They're going into a chaotic situation, obviously. There are multiple people around. And you see this sort of unfold. You see a woman come into the frame, approach the officer. He pushes her back because he's trying to apprehend the actual suspect. She comes again and hits him, and he responds with a punch that lays her out. I mean, it is a finishing blow. But I see this video as we're in a post-George Floyd world, so everything is very sensitive.
Can I
yes,
stop? Can I stop you? I just want to let a little more
Go ahead.
of the detail of the background. So when the camera when the camera turns on, when we first get the image, it's a nutty scene where somebody is in handcuffs. There are a lot of citizens around this group of officers, and at least one person being arrested. Maybe it's more.
Yeah, it's chaotic, but it looks like at least one person. Yeah.
And there's a few police officers, and then you have the person holding the camera and a few other citizens sort of surrounding, kind of asking aloud, like, what's happening here? It's nuts.
Yes.
Then you see a woman walk past the person holding the camera, so they're walking into view. You can only see their back, and she walks right up into the fracas, right?
Yes. She wades into it. And doesn't look happy. I mean, she's agitated as well.
Yes. But you don't know what role she has. But she's clearly yelling at the officers, and she sort of then reaches in maybe to touch one of the suspects or to push the officer off. And as she does, she makes contact. The officer turns around, pushes her, and then she hits him.
Firmly. More than her touch.
Yes.
I'll agree.
Oh,
yes.
for sure. Sure. At this point, she's just sort of wading in with her hands. He pushes her away. She then reaches back. I think it's open-fisted and slaps him. It's not in the face, I don't think. It's hard to tell. Upper body, face maybe, and it seems open-handed. And that's when he's an enormous man.
Sure.
You know, he's
Big
a
officer.
220-pound dude or something, maybe more,
Yep.
reaches back and lays her out.
Yeah, I think initially when you see a cop punch someone, I think there's a visceral discomfort with just the mode of hitting with a fist.
Yes.
Because
and it's a woman as well.
And it's a woman. Yes,
Yes.
There's many layers to this. He is hitting a woman in the face, knocks her out pretty viciously.
Yes.
And I think when people see officers ball up their fist and not use restraints, but rather use physical force to combat someone, there's just a reaction you have that this is not the way that officers who wear a uniform should behave, just on its face.
It's also, there's a proportionality point here, right?
Yes.
He was such a huge man, and she was a tiny little thing, right, when she came up. And his force was something she could never muster in a million years. And again, it laid her out cold.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you know, more than was necessary to put her aside, although she was wading into a very... Now I want to get into the officer's shoes, in other words. The officer is in a very chaotic situation. There are a lot of people around. There are a lot of people shouting at him, obviously unhappy or at least confused with the situation that's going down and who they're apprehending. It's unclear why they're confused,
It was chaotic and potentially dangerous for the officers as well.
Potentially dangerous.
Although there were a number of officers, but yes.
And you hear this sort of cited as, it sounds like an excuse, officer safety. Officers say this when they pull someone over on the road. This is why we pull them out of the car. Officer safety. But they really believe this. They believe that there are fewer officers on site. They're already the object of scorn and ridicule, more commonly in the post-George Floyd world. And he does. He overreacts. He punches this woman in the face. But officers are sort of skittish at this point, right? And he's nervous in that situation because he has to apprehend this individual, take them in, and people are not happy about it, and he feels outnumbered and levels her. He wasn't disciplined. So part of the story is the officer has not yet been disciplined for hitting the woman, even though this video has gone very viral. 3 people were arrested, not including the murder suspect, the attempted murder suspect, for basically disorderly conduct, spitting at the officers and things of that nature. So it indicates that there were a lot of people.
Well, that's something. There were people, not just a lot of people, but people who were going at the officers and
with more than just words.
Right.
You're not going to be arrested for calling them pigs. You're going to be arrested when you actually try to sort of do something physically to interfere with their investigation.
Right.
So what do you make of this? People are outraged, obviously, that this officer hasn't been disciplined. I see it as a situation where this woman was interfering with his lawful duties, and I know I sound like a sort of cop loving guy, but I'm not. I'm just taking
you don't have to apologize for your opinion.
Video
it is what it is. Look, first let's break it down from a forensic let's break it down from a legal point of view.
Yeah.
Police in this country and probably everywhere are given a huge amount of deference for how much force they use.
Yes.
Right. Obviously, they're not treated by like a common citizen, nor should they be. Right. The trial of Derek Chauvin and the George Floyd killing. The burden of proof that was on the prosecutors to actually incarcerate him was incredibly high. It wasn't just, well, if he was a private citizen and use this kind of force, would he have died? It was, he's a police officer, and his whole defense is, I have to do what's necessary to protect myself and protect the citizenry.
Yes.
And so
there is latitude.
There's a
discretion.
huge amount of latitude and discretion. It is incredibly rare that police officers are ever really taken to task for the use of force. Maybe more and more they are, but it's very, very rare. We have a situation here. It is certainly not George Floyd. To your point, in George Floyd, there was no real threat to the officer. The officers were totally in control of the situation and totally in control of the person that eventually died. And it was pretty obvious excessive use of force.
Yes.
To hold him down for 8 minutes under, with a knee to the neck. That whole awful
The crowd
scene.
was not intervening. Remember, you see the officers standing there. The crowd
the
is recording, and they're upset, but they're not intervening with the investigation.
Although I think I may disagree with your ultimate conclusion, I do agree that it is terrifying to be an officer in that situation. And you are on edge, and there are real and present threats to your safety at that moment. When the woman comes up, she pushes, and then he pushes her back, and then it looked to me, open-fisted him in the upper body. I think that's what I see. I just think that for an officer to react with that level of force when he is that large of a man, you better be sure.
Yeah.
You better be sure. You better know what the situation is. And it's fine for him to say, look, I panicked in the moment. And I might even buy that. And that's people, he's human, and they panic in the moment. That doesn't seem to be what he's saying. They seem to be saying it was a proper use of force given the situation. And I just don't see it that way. He could have used less force, and he should have been more measured in this situation. Again, it's easy for me to say. I'm not the one who's there on the street corner with a lot of people spitting at me. I got it.
Yes.
But that doesn't justify everything, right? He couldn't have pulled out his gun and shot. You would agree with that.
Absolutely.
So at some point, we have to say there is a measure of force that is too much. Did this not get there? So
I think you raise good points. There's also a measure of there are other officers present.
Yes.
So he's the officer who is, his back is to her when she approaches him. So
I'm sure startles him.
And I think it startled him.
Yeah.
You don't want anyone touching you while you're trying to apprehend what you believe to be a violent person who you're trying to sort of take into custody. The other officers have a duty, and you saw this in George Floyd, which obviously was an overuse of force, but other officers are there for crowd control. They're there to make sure that officer can do his job and apprehend that person. Maybe they dropped the ball by not securing the perimeter around that guy and cutting that woman off at the pass, and maybe she doesn't get hit, maybe she gets restrained, maybe she gets put off to the side. So maybe there's a lapse there that the officers, the inclination is to defend their actions, right? They're sort of a union of people who say, don't question us, we do a very dangerous job, how dare you, he did everything okay. And you're adding the nuance, and I think you can add that nuance. It's a very difficult situation. This is not George Floyd. Those situations are easier to describe, easier to sort of come to a conclusion that was wrong. This one is closer to me.
It is. It is closer. I just, I don't think he should be criminally prosecuted. Certainly,
she wasn't killed. She was hurt.
She was hurt.
Yeah.
But you also can, we keep comparing to George Floyd, but you also can see the very material distinction between the two situations. She was hurt. I'm sure it seems like she's going to be okay. Yeah. But I do think that he acted somewhat inappropriately. I wouldn't be surprised if a little bit of discipline is thrown his way, some training to handle these situations better in the future. The
response, the problem with these types of situations is the response won't feel like enough. Whatever they do, the level of discipline that they, exact, someone's going to be upset with. If it's too heavy, the cops are going to say, how dare you? How are we supposed to do our job? If it's a slap on the wrist, people are going to say, you're letting the cops run wild in our city. So these are difficult sort of judgment calls.
And just there is a statement that the NYPD issued. It's a similar statement. I think this is cut and pasted out of the handbook. Quote, while police were effecting the arrest of multiple individuals on scene, I'm sorry. While police were effecting the arrest, multiple individuals on scene interfered by physically assaulting numerous officers. One officer sustained a minor injury to the head. Very matter of fact, she did physically assault him. She put her hands on him.
But when officers use terms like physically assault, and then you see a video where she's wandering into frame, that's why people don't like how cops all sort of like toe the line.
Right.
You know, you could have described this as this is an unfortunate. There's another statement the cops could put out that this is an unfortunate situation. It's but you can't,
you can't get
interfere.
That inch. If you give that inch, there will be miles taken on the other side. Yeah.
So they toe the line. So anyway, that is it's a huge story. The video you got to check out on our website. I want to shift gears from violent cop interactions to Berkeley. This is a story that fascinated you. Tell us about it.
So the mask mandates have basically come and gone for COVID, but Berkeley, not to be denied, is instituting a new mask mandate for the flu. They are saying that because the flu is running rampant, it always does this time of year, and I think it's particularly bad this year. I read a lot about this, actually. Because nobody was getting the flu over the last 2 years, we were all masked, we were staying inside, we were social distancing, the number of the cases of the flu was way down. Of course, our natural immunities to the flu have not been built up. People are also getting COVID vaccination shots. They don't want to also get a flu vaccination shot, although scientifically both are perfully safe to get at the same time. But people are scared. They haven't been getting the flu vaccine.
We've been in our bubble, so our immunity is down.
So there is already happening a bit of a flu, a bit of an increase in the flu, and there is a real fear in the public health community that this fall is going to be bananas with the flu. Berkeley, not to be undone, is getting in front of this and saying, civil liberties be damned, personal liberties be damned. We want every single student to wear a mask, not to prevent it against COVID, because we realize it's no longer a risk, but to prevent against the flu.
Now, we have to give people the context of why this is such a hot button issue and why this story really resonates. You have to explain Berkeley. Berkeley, is a UC. It's a University of California. It's a
one
public
of the very
university,
best schools in the country,
but it has a reputation.
Yes,
Berkeley has in the 60s. It was the site of many anti-war protests. It's always been anti-establishment and very far to the left.
Yes.
And so when Berkeley decides that we want to have people wear masks under more scenarios, as the rest of the world is sort of opening up and lessening the mask mandates, it feels like the end of the world to the people who are in red states and so forth. Berkeley is the reason we're like, look at how they're taking your liberties over nothing, over the flu.
Yes.
It makes for quick headlines. There's no doubt that having a mask mandate for the flu will improve the numbers of
reduce the number of people
getting the flu. There's no doubt to that science. What they're sacrificing, Berkeley is saying, is not much. Berkeley is always going to come out on this side of the issue, and I think they overplayed their hand personally.
Well, just to be clear, I slightly misstated earlier. It's masks are required during the flu season for anybody not vaccinated. So you're gonna have to prove your vaccination status in order to not wear a mask. Yeah, they overplayed their hand. I mean,
they overplayed a little bit
because where does it end, right? If it's for the flu today, the flu is a terrible disease. It actually kills more people than any other virus, I think it is, right?
But this is a college campus. The flu doesn't kill many 20-year-olds.
It does not kill many 20-year-olds. And even if it does, people are willing to take that risk. The idea of this public university coming along and saying, we're going to mandate it for everybody, because once this happens, there's something every year. It's the flu comes every year. Is this our forever situation?
Yes. And this was the anxiety that people had about mask mandates. So it sort of plays into the hand of people saying, if they make us wear it for coronavirus, we're going to have to wear it for the flu. Well, here we go.
Yeah,
this is what they're talking about. And when you sort of fulfill the expectations of the conspiracy-minded people, you create a real problem. And I don't think it's worth it to lessen the number of flu cases in this way.
Right.
That's my thought.
Now, we should say that the mask mandate during COVID saved literally, in this country alone, millions of people's lives.
Without question.
And worldwide, tens of millions.
I say without question, although I'm sure many people would question it.
But people who question it can question everything they want. Between the COVID precautions, social distancing, and staying at home, millions of people's lives were saved. So we're not undermining that at all. But how far does it go?
Yeah, and we're not trying to minimize the flu.
There are risks.
We
live with risks.
The flu is miserable, and there are older professors. There are people to protect even at universities. So I'm not trying to be flip about college campus being the unnecessary place. But you do have to balance these things. And it seems as though Berkeley is unwilling to give any quarter to the other side of the argument and saying, look, it's the flu and we don't want to have fewer cases. You don't want fewer cases of the flu.
Do you really want somebody to die?
Yeah, you want
one person dies, isn't that one person too many? All that kind of
And that's no way
nonsense
to have dialogue.
Right.
All right. So I want to end with the
goat of goats?
ongoing farewell tour or farewell tournament of Serena Williams, which is becoming an event, right? The U.S. Open is always, it's a major, so it has its viewers, but this one feels very special. Even I go home and watch tennis, and I'm not a big tennis viewer. But Serena Williams is on her sort of last run during the U.S. Open.
She's retiring after the U.S. Open.
Yes.
40 years old.
She wins last night. In an upset. I mean, she has not played many tournaments. She beat the 2 seed.
2 seed. Serena Williams,
Huge.
it's on the grand scale of things, at the highest level of pro, she's not a great tennis player anymore, right? She's not ranked very highly. She hasn't beaten a ranked opponent in a while. she's older and she doesn't care as much. It happens to us all, right? Good for her. She's the GOAT. But she last night beat Anit Kontaveit, common spelling, and she won 7-6, 2-6, 6-2. And it looked for all the world, because she wins the first set 7-6. Very close set. She pulled it off.
She was serving really well. And then
next set,
fluky.
She loses 2 games to 6. She gets blown out of the building in set 2. She was just, refueling.
Yes.
She wins the third set 6-2.
I have a take on this. So what's going on? The crowd is packed with celebrities.
Yes.
I mean, the U.S. Open has its celebrities every year, but you had Tiger Woods out there. Yeah. You had Bella Hadid, Gigi Hadid, Spike Lee, Zendaya, Jared Leto, LeBron James. You've seen Dr. Ruth, Bill Clinton. They are all unanimously behind Serena Williams.
Yes.
I think this adds an element that I don't want to say unfair, but it is harder for her opponents to compete in that atmosphere. And even on this during the post-game press conference, what was her name again?
Anit Kontaveit.
Anit Kontaveit mentioned this. She says, look, I was aware that this was going to be, the crowd was going to be behind her, but this felt different. It was hard on me. I think Serena is able to play beyond her abilities at this point because the crowd is so behind her and distracting her opponents. So I don't want to say that she won't deserve to win the U.S. Open. If she wins it, she wins it. I think everyone is trying to win, but she does have a distinct advantage in that the crowd is lustily booing every double fault, doing things of her opponents, doing things that are
probably affects the umpires as well.
And they're usually not part of the decorum of tennis. Tennis has a quality that is a little bit like golf. There's a quietness usually for certain moments. Yeah. It's not baseball, it's not football, it's not basketball with rowdy crowd the entire time. And I think it's really impacting the outcomes here. Not in an unfair way, but do you see that?
Oh, I see it. I think she went up against a relatively, and I don't mean to insult her, but sort of a weak-minded opponent based on what I heard, somebody who was easily impacted by the crowd. There are killers out there, right? Serena Williams was one of them, and probably still is in this way. Mental killers that the crowd can get out of my way, and I'm going to destroy this person.
Yes.
And that's not the opponent she had. There are 4 or 5 women on the women's draw that Serena Williams still has to get through because she's only through round 2, and there are 4 preliminary rounds. You have to win 7 matches to win. There are killers out there.
Yes.
Who are, at this stage in their career, better tennis players than Serena. And the crowd noise, if anything, going to be Kobe Bryant to them. It's going to fuel them. That hatred, that vitriol is going to fuel them. And they are ice-cold, stone-blooded killers. And they're going to...
Do you believe that all of these players out there want to be the ones to take down Serena in her final tournament?
Yes.
Or is there an element that they're all like, she should have this magical run because I'm 22 and I'll have plenty of tournaments, but let Serena have this moment.
What would Kobe have done in that situation against Michael Jordan? Cut your throat.
Cut your throat.
And there are women out there who are like that. Serena, good for Serena. She beat an incredibly skilled tennis player yesterday. No
absolutely.
question about it. But she beat a tennis player who was ripe to be beaten with that sort of atmosphere. She's not going to have that along the way.
So there's a long road. What is your prediction?
I keep putting it right at the semis. Jimmy Connors in '91 when he was long past his prime. And he had this epic run at the U.S. Open. The crowd was behind him, just like it is right now. Jimmy Connors was to that era what Serena Williams is to this. And he got to the semis in an incredible, I remember the quarterfinal match was unbelievable, but he got to the semis against Jim Courier, who was just better. He's just better.
Younger and better at that point in his career.
Wasn't going to let the crowd upset him.
So you think she will not walk away with a victory? She won't end her career on a victory?
I don't. I would guess... You know what? She could lose any match. Yeah, she's just outmatched out there sometimes.
But it's must-see TV. You would agree that every game of hers at this point is just special. Feels special to watch.
Last thing to end on this, to end the whole thing on, for her sport, the greatest ever. We've talked about this. Wayne Gretzky is the only person who comes close, I think.
Yeah, I think she is in that Wayne type of category. She's not. There's not much of an argument. Now, over time, maybe someone will amass that many.
But the daylight between the best ever and the second best ever for her, if it's Martina or I forget who holds the record. Margaret Court.
Margaret Court is a very big one.
Is the biggest
That's whose record she broke.
She doesn't have a bet. Serena's not beaten it.
Oh, hasn't bested Court.
So
okay.
Margaret Court has like 20. Well, it's Margaret Court didn't play in the open era.
Yeah.
She had to play against much fewer and lesser competition, whatever. But I'm sure Serena wanted that record and didn't get it.
Yeah,
unless she wins this.
If she ends on this and then she would tie Margaret Court,
believe she would tie. Yeah,
be incredible.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see.
All right, bye guys.
Take care.